All right. Who on earth is doing a live at 3:30 in the morning? Not even 3:30, 3:27 in the morning. Thank you to the four of you joining me right now. I want to go deep into analytics. And I want to talk about analytics because a very smart person reached out to me in the Toronto media space very recently and presented a case for why Fred VanVleet is the best player on the Raptors. And, as an analytics nerd, I had to do the digging. And obviously, I know that the analytics love Fred VanVleet just the same way they loved Kyle Lowry. And I want to demystify this. All right. I want to start with an introduction into what's wrong with analytics. We'll talk about specifically, we're going to talk about 538's Raptor model. We're going to talk about tracking data. We're going to talk about how far we've come as a analytics community, right, in the NBA, relative to where we were just 5-6 years ago. I mean, it's moving fast. All right, but there are so many things that we're still not getting right. There's still so many things where it's noisy or it's just we're sailing blind, right? Defense is one of those things, but specifically one thing that people often use to dismiss analytics almost outright is Nikola Jokic. How can someone measured by one metric be so great, measured on one end be so great? He's better than Michael Jordan on offense. He's better than he's better than everyone on defense according to one. So this is a Ringer article on Nikola Jokic. Just will read it out. Um, so essentially, it's just talking about how, according to RAPM, he is an eighth percentile defender, which would make him among rotation players one of the worst defenders in the league. And then, of course, according to 538's model, he's average. And then, according to Real Plus Minus, ESPN's Real Plus Minus, he is like one of the best defensive players in the league. And so, how do you reconcile three different statistical models coming up to a completely different conclusion about Nikola Jokic? Well, I think it's really important to demystify all of this. And since most of us, haven't touched a math textbook or a stats textbook since after high school, I can completely understand how regression models and whatever these graphs are trying to show here can become a little bit confusing, and you just want something. You just want something to look at and something that says this guy's good and this guy's bad. You can't do that. You can't do that because if you talk about things without understanding what they're measuring, you have no concept of what you're actually communicating, right? So, for instance, it's really important. I mean, I think it's really obvious to understand that 13 points per game is higher than 11 points per game. That someone who grabs 12 rebounds per game is a much better rebounder than someone who grabs 3 rebounds per game. We can all see that. Why? Because 12 is bigger than 3, right? We know that a 35 point per game guy is going to be, technically he's a better scorer than a 25 point per game guy, right? So when two fan bases come at each other and they're comparing, say, Jaylen Brown and Pascal Siakam, all you have to do is say, well, my guy scores more. All right. Well, the analytics pseudo nerds, I want to call them pseudo nerds because they're not real nerds, right? They're just people who read a different set of data. And they say, well, my guy's got a higher Raptor or higher Darko or a higher LeBron or a higher Draymond than your guy. And this guy's like, what the hell does that even mean? And they call it advanced. If you don't dig into how these numbers come to be, you don't dig into the methodology, you never understand the weaknesses. So let's try to understand the best of our ability and raise this community, and just try to put this in terms that we can all understand, right? I mean, let's try. Okay, so we're gonna use Raptor by 538, which I think is good. I think genuinely speaking, it has its issues. It over prioritizes certain types of players, and I'm gonna just talk about what it is before I talk about what I think is wrong with it and what I think is right with it. We'll go into examples. Naturally, we're gonna go into examples about. I'm gonna show you year by year. I'm gonna show you Raptor, rankings and WAR rankings from 2018, 2019 when we had Kawhi and Paul George, Kawhi and Paul George, Rest in peace, Los Angeles Clippers, by the way, just got eliminated by the Phoenix Suns. What a hell of a game by Devin Booker. But I just want to say that, want to talk about how close was a Kyle Lowry to a Kawhi Leonard. Who was the third best player on that team? I think Raptor will have a very shocking answer for you. And then we'll progress forward. We will look at why, this analytics seemingly seems to really love Kyle Lowry so much. Why is that? And we'll talk about what it's even trying to measure. So let's start with what is Raptor. So it stands for Robust Algorithm Player Tracking On-Off Ratings. It's 538's new NBA statistic. It's a little bit old at this point. It is actually, ironically, named after the 2018-2019 Raptors, who were predicted by 538's model to be better to win over the Golden State Warriors, which is shocking. And I mean, most data models had the Golden State Warriors going over, but Raptor correctly predicted. What did Raptor think of the Raptors currently? Well, this is what Raptor thought of the Raptors this year. This is the green line represents the Raptors' odds of making the playoffs, and the white line at the bottom represents the Raptors' odds of winning the championship. You will notice that sometime around December, which is right around when Pascal Siakam got injured, Raptors started to see the writing on the wall for the Raptors, and it never quite got better. I mean, it got a little bit better, and then it just fell apart. But the Raptors really aren't a team that trended upward. Were the Lakers? Yes. Were the Kings? Yes. Notice that despite being the higher seed, Raptor gives the Kings almost no shot to win the NBA Finals. That's interesting. So it's going right beyond win-loss, and it's using predictive data. Now, what are we talking about here? Predictive data, regression models, tracking data. What are we talking about? So NBA teams highly value. So like let's just get into how this is actually looking at offense. So NBA teams highly value floor spacing, defense, and shot creation, and they place relatively little value in traditional big man skills. Now, you'll remember that John Hollinger's PER model, which over-prioritized big men because it overvalues shot percentage, shooting percentage, without any context of true shooting, effective field goal percentage. It just looked at it looked at field goal percentage. It overvalued rebounds because rebounds are necessarily a good thing. Raptor takes it much further. Okay, and we're going to get into how it breaks down a rebound. What is a rebound? Is an uncontested defensive rebound the same thing as an offensive rebound? Because if you tell me a guy averages 12 rebounds per game, I have no idea what the hell that means. Were they contested? Were they uncontested? Were they putbacks? What happened when those rebounds? And this is important. It's just the same thing as assists, right? If a guy just dribbles out the ball, I have been on this all year. You cannot tell me that Fred VanVleet is the best is the best passer on the team because he has the most assists, because he also has the most passes, right? If you have the most passes, you can have the most assists. Tracking data cuts through a lot of that noise. It talks okay, so let's move on here. It highly values two-way wings like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Raptor thinks ball-dominant players such as James Harden, Steph Curry are phenomenally good. It can have a love-hate relationship with centers, who are sometimes overvalued in other statistical systems, but it appreciates modern centers like Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid, as well as defensive stalwarts like Rudy Gobert. What is a modern center? Important to realize. Modern centers take a disproportionate number of high-quality shots relative to most other centers, right? Centers of the past, right? It's not all low post shit, right? It's high post, it's passing. It's shot creation as opposed to shot finishing. It's always going to value someone like Joel Embiid, who creates a lot of his own shots, more than it values someone like Clint Capella or DeAndre Jordan. But you might look at it and say, well, DeAndre Jordan shoots a hell of a lot of higher percentage than a lot of these guys who create their own shots. Yeah, but there is a value placed on shot generation and shot creation, as there should be. PER, I don't think, accurately measures that, which is why guys like Robert Williams are regularly going to be better than guys like Jason Tatum. according to certain statistics. And I think that that is a massive problem that Raptor solves. Look at passing. So enhanced assists. So we're going to go right past actual just assists. Likewise, the value of an assist in Raptor is proportional to the expected value of the resulting shot. So assists on dunks, corner threes, considerably more valuable than assists on mid-range jumpers. In addition, give partial credit for what the NBA calls free throw assists. So passes that result in a teammate shooting a free throw. However, we find there isn't much value in what the NBA calls potential assists that don't result in baskets or free throw attempts. We do, however, give player credits for things like net passes. So the NBA keeps track of the number of passes a player makes and receives during a game, and the positive passing differential is associated with a higher RAPM in and out of the sample. So what are we talking about when we talk about like tracking data? We're going to look into that in 1 second, but take a look, for instance, rebounding. So enhanced offensive rebounds. So offensive rebounds, tricky category. On the one hand, the value of an offensive rebound is intrinsically quite high, right? A team not only gets new life on its possession after an offensive board, but it also in a premium position to score via putback opportunity. Although it depends on how the rebound is secured, the average value of a possession after an offensive rebound is around 1.2 points, which is a 60% 2-point shot. Okay. On the other hand, a lot of rebounding has to do with being in the right place at the right time. Rebounding can involve a fair amount of luck, and loitering near the basket, hoping for rebounds, can have a negative consequence for the team's spacing. But in general, offensive rebounds are becoming more valuable as offensive rebounding rates get lower, having fallen from 33% in the mid 80s to about 23% in today's NBA. So for both offensive and defensive rebounds, Raptor makes various fixes for the rebound statistic. Essentially, our goal is to calculate how much a rebound affects the expected value of a possession. And now we are actually getting into the nitty-gritty of what Raptor is attempting to tell a story of, which is not 35 points per game, 12 rebounds per game, 2 assists per game. That's not the story. It's not the story of 52% from the field versus 47% from the field. What it is trying to estimate is a catch-all statistic that says how much better is the team because you were on the floor on offense and on defense. That's it. So there's a way, for instance, for Jakob Poeltl, without scoring a single basket the entire game, due to screen assists, due to offensive rebounding, due to his secondary assisting, like sort of the hockey assists, it's possible for him to have an intrinsically positive value on scoring without scoring. That's how basketball really is played, right? It's also possible for a guy to go out and, I don't know, take every single shot, score 67 points, and be a net negative because of efficiency and how poorly his team performed. The goal is how much better are we because of you relative to something. And what is the relative to something? The relative to something is an average player. So you capture what an average player is. What is a league average player? Okay, let's say the league average player is Robert Covington. Pretend that Robert Covington is the most average player in the league. So based on that, we are going to say, plus what are you over Robert Covington? Or how much worse are you than Robert Covington? I'm not saying Robert Covington is the league average player. I'm just saying, let us assume, because every single stat, like PER, average, what's the average player in PER? 15. So 15 is the average. So if you're 15.6, considers you above average. 22.6, you're significantly above average. 12.2, you're below average. So 15 is the median, I believe, or the mean. I believe it's the median player. So 0 is basically the average player in terms of Raptor. And so you go above that, and that is how much better you are. So let us take a quick look at some. Okay, before we get into that, just want to show you how far. And Raptor is fantastic in terms of, the things that it measures. However, it has a major blind spot we're going to talk about right after. Here's something that you may not realize, but you should realize if you've been following this channel. Did you know the NBA tracks every foot traveled on defense and offense by every single player. It also tracks how fast players move around the league. It also tracks how many passes you throw, how many shots you take, where those shots are taken from. Tracking data is making stats so much more interesting and so much more accurate. Obviously, defense still has a ways to go, but take a look at the 5 players who traveled the most on defense this year. And that's actually distance traveled total. So Mr. Scotty Barnes with 203.3 miles traveled. Okay. That's just 21 miles less than the league leader, which is Mikal Bridges, the most active player 2 years running. Scotty was second last year. So when they say, oh, he's a little less active this year, still top 5 in the NBA. 5 most active players in the league. Okay. And he's just as fast moving around the court in terms of the average speed, offense, defense combined, as Mikal Bridges. Right. So you might also be surprised to realize that, of course, as I mentioned, secondary assists, passes made, potential assists, assists on, points, assist point created, adjusted, like everything is tracked here. And so the bottom, you see passes made per game by Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, going down the list, right? You will notice passes received as well. Notice a bit of a trend there, right? So do you see a correlation between assists and passes made? Because I certainly do. Okay. The more passes a player made, the more assists they generated. That's just how it is, right? Scotty's not that far off from Pascal Siakam in anything other than passes received, right? So those of us who were arguing for Scotty to have more of a playmaking responsibility, really it's because we don't see that big a gap between him and Fred as playmakers or him and Pascal as playmakers. And these numbers sort of back that up. The only thing is volume of attempts, right? So if some guy takes 12 shots and the other guy takes 8 shots, it would be very difficult for the guy who takes 8 shots to outscore the guy who takes 12 shots. It's just how it is. It's the same thing with passing. It's the same thing with, playing closer to the basket in relation to rebounds, right? It's going to be very difficult for Fred VanVleet to grab as many rebounds as Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl plays a lot closer to the basket and he's a lot taller. My point is, we have to take situation into context, okay? Now, here's some, this is not in order, but hopefully I'll put it in order here. Okay, so I want you to look at overall Raptor for the Orlando Magic. Just take a look at this, right? And what sticks out? Paolo Banchero just won Rookie of the Year. But according to Raptor, he is a negative on offense and a negative on defense, which means that per 100 possessions, his team is 1.4 points worse than average on offense and 1.7 worse on defense. That's a pretty bad score, right? For a Rookie of the Year. But that's kind of the case with young players. And that's why we say young players seldom impact winning, right? Take a look at this. Here's the Detroit Pistons. Jaden Ivey. Notice the rookie at the bottom? Yeah, that's him. Bogdanovich, the only plus on offense for the Detroit Pistons this year. Bogdanovich and Corey Joseph. Surprise. The 2 veterans were contributing positively on offense. And this is honestly why the Detroit Pistons were so freaking bad this year. Now, this is 20. Okay, I wish I had gone the other way, but this is the Raptors' overall Raptor. That's a little bit of a tongue twister here. You'll notice Fred VanVleet at the very top, right? OG Anunoby second, Scotty Barnes third, Pascal Siakam fourth. What the hell? This is a little bit shocking and probably should be shocking for most people, that Pascal Siakam, in terms of WAR, is 4th on his own team. And yet there's a sizable number of people in this fan base that think he is worth a Supermax, All-NBA, MVP. This is not someone who is analytically impacting the game in the way that his regular box score would suggest. All right. And I think the shocking part here is it's not too shocking to me that he's second on offense, like he's the second best player on offense on the team. What is shocking, however, is his defense being the team worst. You would assume that that would be Gary Trent, right? But it's not. And to those saying he played more minutes, this is per 100 possessions. He tanked the defense this year. And I was complaining about his defense literally all year, and people kept saying, Rob, you don't understand the schemes. This is the tracking data. That's what's telling you. Now, of course, on the one hand, I'm not going to be critical of Raptor for not measuring defense properly and then be, saying, well, look, Pascal Siakam sucks on defense. But I do think the eye test confirms a lot of this. No? You don't think so? Okay, wait a second here. Why? What the heck is happening here? Sorry, I'm trying to... Thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting to some of these comments here. Chat check. Cool. Oh, we got 48 people at 3:48 a.m. Wow. I mean, that's pretty cool. Okay, let's get to this. Why am I not able to pull these up, man? Sorry, guys. I'm having trouble here with pulling these on the screen. Give me a sec here. Okay, now we got it. Okay, so this is for 2020, 2021. So this is the Tampa year. All right, notice a trend. Pascal Siakam, not quite analytically, doing so well there. Gary Trent Jr., of course, the first year, his defense was absolutely horrific. It has gotten better, right? This is the 2019. Sorry, guys. These are so out of order. I apologize. I was supposed to put them in order. Hang on. Oh, man. And this is last year. So you remember how I showed you Paolo Banchero being a negative on offense and defense? This is why it should be so impressive what Scotty did last year. And no, it's not just because he had better team around him. It's perfectly possible to have like a completely terrible team around you and, be an analytics darling like Franz Wagner is. Impressive here last year. Look at Precious Achiuwa's defensive Raptor. It's impressive as hell. But once again, you see a trend. Fred VanVleet leading the team, right? Now, here's a look at the Knicks for this year. Notice a trend, right? There's a certain type of player that seems to be on top of most of these lists. And it's the type of player over and over again. Jalen Brunson, Emmanuel Quickley, Josh Hart. All right. Now take a look at this. Here's the Raptors championship roster. What do you notice? Well, number one, this is the best year Pascal Siakam's ever had, right? This is also the year I believe his usage was around 21%, right? Note, defensive Raptor for Marc Gasol, team leading, right? This was a terrible year for OG Anunoby. He was literally the worst player on the team, according to this. He just had a really bad year, adjusting to the bench. Fred VanVleet, kind of middle of the pack, strong case to be made. Third best player, sixth best player on the team, sixth man. But look at Danny Green. I bet if I had asked you before this chat who would be third on this, I don't think you would have said Danny Green. Put some respect on Danny Green's name, man. That guy shot blistering hot from the field for the Raptors, and from three, he was great on defense for us. He was incredible. Such an underrated part about that move. You basically traded Jakob Poeltl, who was a hell of a backup center, and you traded DeMar DeRozan, but you actually got Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard. And I think that the Danny Green part gets really lost in that. Danny Green was beast. Look at that. But note, who's the type of player that's consistently going to do well in the Raptor model? Creator wings, right? Ball dominant guards. Always. So, is it possible? Is it possible, right, for you to flip a role and flip the analytics? 100,000% it is. Okay. There are so many oversights when it comes to analytics. First, let's talk about the defense, right? It is nearly impossible to measure defensive synergy, role coaching, lineup optimization data. None of these things are factored in to most analytics models, if not all analytics models. Teams are consistently trying to one up each other to find something that fits a little bit better than the previous thing, right? And sure, 50 years ago, I don't even think they were measuring blocks. You don't have block records for Bill Russell. It massively, massively understates his impact on how he was changing those Boston Celtics teams. But man, if we had tracking data for Bill Russell, if we could actually measure all those intangible things that he was doing on the court, from screen assists to hockey assists to correct rotations to, all of these things, contested or uncontested rebounds, I have a feeling that we would have a completely different appreciation for the type of player Bill Russell was. Okay? So, what about today? We're definitely measuring better stuff. But are we measuring the right stuff? Are we still missing something really massive? I think on defense, we've gotten a little bit better, right? We're no longer just measuring steals. We measure deflections now. Okay, well, that's a step in the right direction, right? With this, with the assists, we're also measuring potential assists. We're also qualifying whether the assist is leading to a dunk, or the assist is leading to a three, or is how much time is left on the clock? What quality of shot are you generating? All of these things are such a marked improvement over assist to turnover ratio, which is where we were just 15 years ago. Analytics in baseball are a little bit easier. Analytics in basketball are difficult. How do you possibly measure how good Fred VanVleet is when he's only played this one role, right? And the more he plays, so here's my theory in terms of what I think the gaps are. I think that an analytic like Raptor, and most analytics in general, have a type of player that they really like. Consider it like, let's just say, for instance, you really love LeBron James, okay? And so you think that scoring, playmaking, all-around impact, two-way impact are very valuable things. So that's your first premise, that being a well-rounded basketball player is significantly more valuable than being a specialist. So how do you say that this is the model player that I want all players to be measured against, when we're making a determination, like, for instance, like someone like Mohamed Abdul-Rauf, right? A gunner, 3-point marksman, decent passer, not so great defender, right? How do you go and say that guy is, an average player or slightly above average player, when he was never put in a system where he was coming off of 4 picks or 3 picks, taking 18 threes a game, which he very well could have, right? How do you judge that? Because he was never put in the right system, right? So when we talk about role optimization, lineup synergy, I'll give you an example. Who creates a block, right? Who creates the block? Let's say, for instance, I have OG Anunoby and I run a scheme where OG Anunoby is going to funnel guys towards Jakob Poeltl, right? And these two players have great defensive synergy, right? Which is that they work really well off of each other. They rotate and cover well for each other. OG has a particular set of skills, not to quote Liam Neeson from Taken, but he has a particular set of skills that make him a terror for ball handlers on the perimeter. Jakob Poeltl presents a great deal of size on the inside, And so these two have this great synergistic relationship, right? In which OG is able to funnel guys carefully along the baseline right into Jakob Poeltl, creating the block. Okay, perfect. What if Jakob Poeltl's shot blocking allows OG Anunoby to be much tighter on his rotations and coverages? So let's just say, for instance, that these two players play together and they create, on one side of the floor, they create a synergistic hub of defense in which they play off of each other, and both of their defensive Raptor goes up because while they're on the court together, they're both doing wonderfully. Well, let's say, for instance, Chris Boucher subs in for Jakob Poeltl. Chris Boucher has nowhere near the basketball IQ of a Jakob Poeltl. Let's just say, in that case, everything OG Anunoby was doing for Jakob Poeltl is now resulting in open layups because Chris Boucher is failing to rotate. So OG Anunoby continues to do exactly what he was doing. The only difference is Jakob Poeltl isn't on the court anymore. And so now, suddenly the Raptors defense is leaking oil, and it's OG's man who's scoring every single time. The scheme doesn't work. So is it up to OG to make up the gap between Jakob Poeltl and Chris Boucher? Is it up to the coach to make up that gap? Or is it simply tough shit? Jakob Poeltl has to sit sometimes, and it's just not going to happen. I think it's up to the coach, personally. But I think there's also an element of tough shit. Same thing with offense. You cannot tell me that offensive players, certain offensive players together, do not create benefits for other offensive players. I firmly believe, based on everything I have seen, that Scottie Barnes makes people better. I think he does all these small things that make other people better. It's nice to see the analytics capturing some element of that because he's been a positive across the board both years. But I don't think it's capturing enough of it, personally. I think there's so many things that he does that don't register. So what I'm trying to say is that you can't just simply say, this guy's better because he scores more. This guy's better because he rebounds more, because there's so much you're missing in that equation. You're saying he shoots more. He's given more opportunities at rebounds. Where you are in a defense, like, so for instance, is it possible, one of this channel's claims, and perhaps one of the more egregious claims, and one of the claims that I am frequently clowned about a lot. I hear the commentary. Sorry, my nose is itchy. One of the frequent criticisms that I've gotten is that I have this claim that if put in a role, in the identical role, if I were to swap Siakam and Barnes roles on offense and defense, that I think Scottie would perform relatively similarly to how Pascal did this year. People will point to, Scottie's struggles without Pascal, right? But I would argue he was really injured during that time. He was coming off an injury. He rushed back because Pascal was out, but he was not himself. But I genuinely believe that if given the same load, same all that stuff, they're very similar players. They're very similar players with a couple of glaring differences. So, but it's hard for someone to wrap their head around someone, who averages 15 points per game being capable of 25 points per game, right? But it happens all the time. In reverse, look at Chris Bosh, 25 points per game scorer for the Raptors. Did he crack 20 with the big three? No. Roll goes down, usage goes down, completely changes. Now he's shooting threes. That's optimization. But why did Chris Bosh start shooting threes? Because Eric Spoelstra is a smart enough person to realize that having him occupy the same space on offense that he used to operate in for the Raptors, which was the mid post, pinch post, high post area, is going to drastically limit the abilities of the team's two best players, which is LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. Aha. So, we can understand that you should tailor your offense around your best players, right? If Dwayne Wade and LeBron James are your best players, then Chris Bosh must become an assist to your best players. And he can't do that if he's demanding 16 post-ups a game. There's always something you're building with. There's always something you're building around. Frequent criticism from me towards Nick Nurse. Now, I think my criticism has gone a little bit overboard over the last couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I've been very, very heated, partially because Nick Nurse and I disagree on one fundamental thing. He built this offense around Fred VanVleet, 100%. And I don't think Fred VanVleet is someone worth building an offense around. That's the fundamental disagreement, okay? But if the understanding is that Fred VanVleet is your best player, which, you know, it's like, this says he is, right? You look at the analytics, you say, God damn it, he is. But the question then becomes, is he your best player because you treat him like your best player and you put him in a role like your best player and everything is built around him like he is your best player? Or are the numbers saying this because he actually is your best player? I would argue it's the former. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but one of my secret wishes, even though I don't want to lose him for nothing, and I'm pretty firm that if he's agreeing to come back for less than 25 million, 26 million, I'd be fine having him back under a new coach who is not literally his biggest fanboy. But one of my biggest wishes would be to watch Fred VanVleet go to a system which is not built around him, and every single analytic completely flip on who he is as a player, because he wouldn't have the same luxuries. He wouldn't have, look at the tracking data and what it's telling you. It is literally telling you that the way he's treated is like an offensive engine, like not a heliocentric hub, but this guy has been given carte blanche over your offense. He's the one receiving passes. Every pass, almost every possession down, he's touching the ball, right? He's always in rhythm. He's getting high quality shots. He's getting screens run for him. He's the one on the he's the pick and roll ball handler, almost always with excellent finishers, whether it be Scotty, whether it be Pascal, whether it be Jakob, right? He's the one who's on the receiving end. So this idea, you know, he's never going to be frozen out of an offense because he is the offense. He runs the offense. I think these stats do, however, point to the fact that Pascal Siakam is highly overrated. You want to look at some of the best guys in the league in terms of Raptor. I mean, honestly, Siakam's not even close. I mean, it's one thing to be 4th or 5th on your own team, and he's not even like top 50 in the league, according to a lot of analytics, right? So how are we reconciling this? Because most people think that, hey, this was an MVP candidate earlier in the season. I think this is where we have all fallen in love with I call it the 3 category model: points, rebounds, assists. If all you focus on is points, rebounds, and assists, and there's something somewhat soothing. Let me give you an example. Following player, no other context, averages 18 points, 9 rebounds, 11 assists. Do you want said player on your team? Right? You might say, God damn it, sounds like a great player, Rob. But you don't know anything about that player with those 3 numbers. You just don't. All you know is that triple doubles are good. And that's pretty close to a triple double. So when you say Pascal Siakam's average 26 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists, you're like, holy shit, that's really close to numbers LeBron put up, right? Just like Jerry Stackhouse got pretty close in his prime to putting up scoring averages like Michael Jordan. And I swear, in his own head, he probably thought he was Michael Jordan. Certainly walked around like it. And maybe some Detroit fans were arguing that he is Michael Jordan. He's the next Michael Jordan. Shit. Vince Carter was often considered the next Michael Jordan. Kobe Bryant got as close as anyone ever did. Man, he was still so far, though. So far. And the analytics prove it. What am I trying to say here? I'm not saying the analytics are perfect. I'm saying they're measuring more than they used to, but there's still a long way to go, especially on defense. But on offense, we're getting pretty close. But the one big blind spot that remains, and I think that it will continue to remain unless we create some sort of metaverse hypothetical in which Scotty Barnes can be plugged into 6 different roles on his team, and then, he's re-synergized with 18 other teams, and we can run out the simulation in some sort of massive computer model, and we say, okay, here's Scotty Barnes with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Jordan Poole, and Draymond Green. Here's Scotty Barnes with Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Jakob Poeltl. Here's Scotty Barnes when he's running point for an entire season. Here's Scotty Barnes when he's the lead initiator. Here's Scotty Barnes when he plays as a pick and roll big. Here's Scotty Barnes when he plays as a pick and roll guard. Here's Scotty Barnes next to Kawhi Leonard. Like, you can't possibly tell me who's who until you see it all. And so the eye test, scouts, growth, trajectory models, etc. The only way to chart growth properly, in my opinion, right, is to keep every other variable static. That's what regression models are, right? You're attempting to measure one variable against a set of other variables and trying to define a relationship between them. Like, for instance, shooting more threes and scoring more points, right? There's a correlation between that, right? Getting more offensive rebounds and getting more dunks. There's a correlation between that, right? It's a significant one. So I think that it would be very interesting for me personally to see the following 2 things. I would be very interested to see Fred VanVleet operating in a role similar to that of a Marcus Smart, where he's not a lead initiator and he's just kind of a catch and shoot guy, occasional secondary ball handler, etc. And I would like to see if these gaudy, analytics hold up, because I don't think they will. The second thing that I would like to see is what Scotty Barnes looks like with shooters, movement shooters, spacers, and active rim running bigs around him. And guys who can shoot, just like bigs who can shoot. Like, we're not going to get that with Jakob Poeltl, probably, right? Unless you make some sort of Splash Mountain trade for a guy like Miles Turner, you're probably not going to get to see him. But if you could see it, the only 2 things that would be left to determine is, number 1, how does he operate in said role? Number 2, how does said role, right? How does said role and him operating in said role impact winning? Because most of us think in terms of what the media member who reached out to me, what he was thinking. How can you, as a team that didn't make the playoffs from the play-in, how can you afford to lose one of your 6 good players? That was the entire gist of an hour-long argument, which is, how can you afford to lose a good player when you're not good? And so the question then becomes, what if losing good player makes you better? What if the nature of good and bad isn't even what's at stake here? What if everything that's at stake in terms of basketball here is all about synergy? Isn't that what Moneyball was about? Isn't that what it was about? It was just really about redefining where wins come from. And I think that analytics are attempting to solve a problem that most people don't even know exists, which is, we don't know what's valuable in basketball. Are shot blocks valuable? In a vacuum, yeah. But how much more valuable is a blocked shot than a charge? Because I don't see charges drawn in the box score every night. But a charge drawn is significantly more valuable than a block. Is it not? Think about it. You get an offensive foul, you get your team one step closer to putting the other team in the penalty. Plus, in most cases, you have now taken one of their key offensive players and put them into foul trouble potentially. A charge drawn is significantly more valuable than a block. Why is it that PER and certain other statistics don't measure this at all? What is this blind spot? And if you measured it, would more people take charges? Because suddenly, this is the NBA's leading charge taker. I mean, we do have those stats and we do talk about them. We don't talk about them in the mainstream, though. I think we should, right? What about a contest, like a shot contest, right? So, hypothetically, consider this. Tracking data says that a contested shot, a contested three-point corner shot, is a good idea. That a player who is within 2 feet of a player taking a three has done a good job on defense, right? But what if it's a terrible shooter? What if it is like the worst shooter in the league? And contesting the shot simply makes the potential for a drive greater. And so technically not contesting that shot might be a better idea. Or a late contest, or maybe 2 feet is too close. Maybe 6 feet is actually optimal. And herein lies the concern. It's so freaking complicated. It's so complicated. The earlier thing I was talking about when we're talking about, I've talked about it in another live, Ben Wallace, right? Ben Wallace in Detroit, Ben Wallace in Chicago. Completely different players. Analytically, eye test, everything. Why? Why? Is it just because he got old? I think that's what a lot of people said. Oh, what do we pay for this bum for? No, man, you took him out of his system. He was thriving in Detroit because he had the perfect team around him to catapult him, right? We talk about Ben Wallace that way. Why don't we talk about Fred VanVleet that way? You don't think everything in this system is geared towards making him better? It is. It totally is. So I look forward to next year and watching that happen. Because I'll tell you right now, Kyle Lowry, his analytics took a bit of a dive after he left Toronto. Now you could say that's aging. Yep. But it's not just aging, right? Because when you go to a team that has a different dynamic, your numbers are going to change. I think that if you run an offense around Scotty Barnes, personally, more not him as a shot taker. I'm not saying he's going to be, taking 26 shots a game or some stupid shit like that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying tailor your offense, tailor your roster around his play style, his strengths and weaknesses. Put him in a position on defense where he's being optimized most. Do for Scotty what Eric Spoelstra did to Chris Bosh for D Wade and LeBron. Because I'll tell you right now, nobody on this roster is worth building around other than Scotty. Not one player. Not one. Scotty, maybe OG. That's it. Okay? You can make your outside case for Fred and Pascal. I don't think so. I think they're past what I would consider a peak. And I would argue, like, realistically, probably not the type of player you want to build something around if you're expecting to win long term. So, will it work? No idea. Will an OG and Scotty, focused team, which is built around their strengths and weaknesses, is that eventually going to win a title? No clue. No idea. Are either one of these guys ever going to become a superstar? No clue. But I can also tell you that those other two guys, they're not going to become superstars either. So you might as well try to see what you have in these guys by giving them the same leash, same leeway, same courtesy that you have Pascal and Fred, which is try to tailor an offense around their strengths and weaknesses on offense and defense and see what you can actually build. I have a feeling, it's a surprising feeling, that you're going to be positively surprised by what they come up with. Anyways, 60 people at 4:16 in the morning, and we're a Toronto-based channel. That's pretty impressive. Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to check the 25 comments now and go to sleep. Gone saying I would like to see Scotty. Yup. Who the hell is Kobe Bryant? I know you're saying Kobe Bryant, but yo, like, I mean, you can say he's close, but he's not that close. Fair point. Um, James, who do you suggest would have been the first option for the Raptors? I mean, here's a wild and completely crazy idea. Um, oh, I'm so happy. What'd you think of that live stream? Um, Look, I to the point of the roster. I think it was 2008, 2009 with Hedo Turkoglu. Personally, I'm not a huge Hedo Turkoglu fan, but I would have tried to initiate the offense through Hedo. I would have made it less Bosch centric. I might have even tried to make him space out for Hedo and I think Andrea at the time, right? So like try to go Hedo in the post, Bosch and Andrea out, invert the offense, see if it worked that way. Sometimes you need some out of box thinking, right? Like again, Fred VanVleet spacing for Siakam and Pascal would be sorry, Siakam and Pascal, Siakam and Scotty would be great. Movement shooting from him would be absolutely phenomenal in that case. Um, oh man, thank you so much. If Sarunas is hired, do you think Fred will leave and Warriors or Kings? Um, man, I'm leaning Kings because I haven't seen the Warriors win. But honestly, I'm leaning Warriors because I just don't. I guess I don't know. It's a toss up, man. I hate to disappoint you on that one, but I feel like it's a toss up. And if Sarunas is hired, do you think Fred will leave? Why would he leave? Fred would probably find a really seamless transition to Sarunas. I know of him a lot. He was one of my favorite players growing up. Um, really liked him in international play, and I think he had like 1 or 2 years in the NBA as well. Always loved him in NBA 2K. Sniper. Um, yeah, I mean, I think he'd be fine. I think Fred would be really happy with Jama. I mean, he spoke very highly of him. He's has a good relationship with Patrick Mutombo. I think the pathway to Fred coming back is, it's there. I think for sure. Um, So this is the problem, right, James? You say they have no depth. That's not true. They have Precious Achiuwa. They have Gary Trent Jr. I mean, it's a hell of a lot more than a lot of other teams have. They have Chris Boucher. Very interesting watching Chris Boucher go back and forth with a YouTuber today. Honestly, I don't think Chris is wrong, man. I really don't. I mean, acting like, he's making excuses for himself that he's saying the young guy should have played more, this guy should have played more. That's exactly it. How do you measure how good a player is when you don't give him a consistent role? How do you measure how good a player is when every single night their role is different, the lineup that they're playing with is different? I understand Nick Nurse came from the G League School of Thought and the British Basketball Association, but man, consistency is a really big thing. You really don't know what you have on a night-to-night basis with these guys. And look, it may be absurd to someone for me, to say like Jeff Doughton and Fred VanVleet are not that far apart as players, right? Someone out there would be like, that's blasphemous. It's not that blasphemous. The gap is not that big. It's not that big. Yeah, it's in Fred's favor for sure. Fine. But it's not that big. There's a lot of things that Jeff does that are like phenomenal. Point of attack defense. But you go and tell somebody that a guy seeking a close to max contract and a guy who didn't even get his two-way converted are pretty similar players and, similar level players. Like, I'm just saying, like, I think they're both fringe. Like, okay, Fred's a starting guard and Jeff is a really high quality backup point guard, in my opinion, right? If you ran Jeff Doughton 18 minutes a night with a consistent role, consistent lineup every single night, I think the good would significantly outweigh the bad. I think his point of attack defense is absolutely amazing. The more he would play, the more he would get comfortable, the more he would actually develop some chemistry with the players he'd be playing with. The numbers would likely improve. Again, all hypothetical. Can't go back and play the season out again. You don't know what would have happened because we never saw it. And I think that that's partially, Chris Boucher said something in the interview that I really loved. He said when Masai, goes in on a guy, he's usually not wrong, right? That's true. That's 100% true. How can you say it's not true? He's been right so often. He was right about Shea. He was right about Giannis. He was right about Scotty. He's been right about Pascal, OG, Jakob, DeLon. He's been right about everybody. Almost every single player this guy ever drafted or brought in has become a serviceable role player in the NBA. How many busts has he had outside of like DeJuan Hernandez? Like how many guys? Bruno Caboclo, okay? Those are the two guys. And even Bruno Caboclo, Bruno Caboclo, in terms of NBA careers, had an above average NBA length career, or at least average-ish. He stuck around the league for like 6-7 years. That's a pretty decent thing for a 20th overall pick. There are a lot of 20th overall picks that are out of the league by their second contract. As far as busts go, if that's your biggest bust, holy shit, you've done really well. Masai's not wrong often, man. He really isn't. So people being like Malachi Flynn. Again, a great example. What's the gap between a Malachi Flynn and a Cole Anthony? You think it's really big, right? Cole Anthony is so much better than Malachi Flynn. He's not. I don't think he is. Sorry, I don't. But Malachi's been dicked around. I think his role has sucked. I looked at Malachi's, college tape. I'm not seeing, I'm not seeing bust, man. I don't see any bust potential. I think he'll catch on. If it's not with the Raptors, that guy's going to do okay somewhere. I'm not saying he's going to be a star. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter, but serviceable backup, he is. Okay? He is definitely a serviceable backup. It's not the same thing. One of them is 21, the other one's 29. Number one of them is on a rookie contract, team control for the next 6 years, 5 years. And one of them is potentially approaching max free agency next year. And, you could have to extend him as early as the summer. Also completely different. And also, can we please talk about the difference in clutch scoring? That's where I say, you have to, this is where analytics need to go, okay? Leverage points. The highest leverage points should count for more. If I want to do a statistical model, I'll give you my idea. Betting odds? For instance, when you go on ESPN Game Tracker, right? At the end of the Game Tracker, it shows you probability of winning, right? So every single time, let's say, for instance, Celtics Raptors, right? Celtics Raptors first quarter. Okay, probability of winning for the Celtics at this point is 70%, right? So when the Raptors score 2 points to open the game, right? The probability goes from 70% to 70% to 69.6% or 69.7%, which means that the 2 points that you scored to open the game moved the probability difference of that game changing outcomes to 0.3% positively, right? Same 2 points scored 95-95 with 18 seconds left on the clock, and you go from 70% loss to 70%, 75% win, right? The swing is so much more drastic in the fourth quarter or in overtime or in high leverage moments or when the game is tied and it's in the fourth quarter. So all of those points in the fourth quarter that Pascal Siakam doesn't shoot so well on, and all of those attempts and all of those threes that he fucks up on in the playoffs, those should count for a lot more than they do. And all of those points in the first quarter, second quarter, in which, he's kind of going ham, those should count for a lot less, in my opinion. And I'm not just saying this because Scotty's a beastly fourth quarter scorer. I'm not saying that. I'm saying because that is how basketball is played. Because Horace Grant, he can score in the first quarter. Kobe Bryant, you need him in the fourth quarter when defenses tighten up, when leverage situations get high. So why, we will give value to a contested three more so than an open three. Not a contested three. We would give value to an unassisted three as higher value than an assisted three. Why? Because self-generation is a skill set that very few players have in the league, or fewer than most players have in the league. And so we reward it. Well, fourth quarter scoring is difficult and being efficient in the fourth quarter is difficult. So why not reward it? Reward it for sure. It's completely different, right? Scotty Barnes is a better scorer in the fourth quarter than Pascal Siakam. Why? He's more efficient in the clutch. Why? He's your most efficient. Well, he is your second or third most efficient clutch squared performer, but also your highest volume clutch squared attempts guy. Why? At 21 years old, this is not common, not at all common, and that's what the last live was about. It's about like how certain players dial it up in the clutch. That's a special skill, man. Anyone can score in the first quarter. I'm not saying anyone, but like most guys can score in the first quarter, transition, whatever, right? 2 points are not 2 points. That's what LeBron said, right? 2 points are not 2 points. I'll explain it to you some other time. Hopefully, this live went into some of it. I hope this was informative. I obviously assume that more people are going to check this out tomorrow. And to those of you who check this out tomorrow, thank you for, listening to me rant about numbers. And hopefully this was somewhat interesting and insightful. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, everyone's entitled to opinion, James. I just, like not my that's just not my opinion. But thank you. Um yeah. I just want to give a quick shout out before I head off. The link is in the description for the Penn Dance Film Festival. And we are returning live May 12th to 14th at Imagine Cinemas Carlton, downtown, College and Young. If you're around, May 12th to 14th, definitely check it out. And yeah, hopefully see you out there. If you like art house films, funny films, independent cinema, definitely come check it out. Meet me on the red carpet, take a picture. I don't know, whatever. And yes, link is in the description below. All right. If you haven't hit subscribe. Our subscriber count is growing, and yeah, don't expect 4:30 lives or 3:30 lives, but if you want to be kept up to date on when we go live, because it happens sporadically and randomly at all hours of the day, definitely hit subscribe and like on your way out. Cheers. Have a good one, guys. Peace.